That's why filtering question not only academics.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Eastrose Fellowship. We're happy you've chosen to join us this morning. I'm Phyllis Adams, your worship leader this morning. Our speaker is our new minister, Reverend Robin, here in her first month in the pulpit. We're so happy to have her with us. She will be speaking today on whooshing up. Can America be moral? That's what, right. So first, let's take a moment this morning to greet those online and greet each other. If you stand as you're able and turn and look at the cameras in the back and wave to our friends online, and then greet each other in the sanctuary. Please be seated and please continue these conversations over coffee later this morning. For our online guests, if you would like to share a joy or concern or an announcement later in the service, you can do so by typing it in the chat space. Here in the chapel, if you have an announcement, write it down and place it in the offering basket, and I will read them at the end of the service. Eastrose is located in the homeland of the Upper Chinookan people, whose territory once spread across the life-giving plains and wetlands of the Wapato lowland, along the great river between Troutdale and Kalama. We acknowledge in particular the Multnomah and Shalala bands of Chinooks, as well as their neighbors, partners, and frequent visitors, the Clackamuts, Cowlitz, Atlata, Kalapuya, Malala, Klickitat, and others. These people live among us today in cities, towns, and villages, on farms and military bases. The words for our call to worship today are by William Schultz. Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart. As we light our chalice this morning, we read these words by Melanie Davis. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Phyllis. Phyllis is our worship leader today. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So wonderful to see so many people here gathering together at Eastrose. My opening words are a poem by Julia Myers called "The Old Threads Are Unraveling." She says, "The old threads are unraveling. Get your needles ready. We are stitching a new quilt of humanity. Bring your old t-shirts, your worn-out jeans, scarves, antique gowns, aprons, old pockets of plenty who have held Earth's treasures. Stones, feathers, leaves, love notes on paper. Each stitch a mindful meditation, each piece of material a story. The more color, the better. So call in the tribes, threads of brown, white, red, orange. Women from all nations start stitching. Let's recycle the hate, the abuse, the fear, the judgment. Turn it over, wash it clean, wring it out to dry. It's a revolution of recycled wares, threads of green, blue, purple, colorful threads of peace, kindness, respect, compassion. They're being stitched from one continent to the next, over forests, oceans, mountains, cities, and towns. The work is hard. Your fingers may bleed. But each cloth stitched together brings together a community, a world, our future world, under one colorful quilt of a new humanity. Our opening hymn is number 121 in the gray hymnal, but the words will be on the screen as well. We'll build a land. Please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able.
invite Tara and our young folks to come to the front for a time for all ages.
Okay, thanks. So today's story is actually a poem, and it's called Change Sings, a Children's Anthem. And it was written by Amanda Gorman, who was our first National Youth Poet Laureate. So a poet laureate is somebody who's a talented poet and also a strong leader. The illustrations are by Lauren Long, and you'll be able to see them up on the screen. So Change Sings, a Children's Anthem. I can hear change humming in its loudest, proudest song. I don't fear change coming, and so I sing along. I scream with the skies of red and blue streamers. I dream with the cries of tried and true dreamers. I'm a chant that rises and rings. There is hope where my change sings. Though some don't understand it, those windmills of mysteries, I sing with all the planet and its hills of histories. I hum with 100 hearts, each of us lifting a hand. I use my strengths and my smarts, take a knee to make a stand. I'm bright as the light each day brings. There is love where my change sings. I show others tolerance, though it might take some courage. I don't make a taller fence, but fight to build a better bridge. I talk not only of distances from where and how we came. I also walk our differences to show we are the same. I'm a movement that roars and springs. There's a wave where my change sings. Change sings where? There, inside me, because I'm the change I want to see. As I grow, it grows like seeds. I am just what the world needs. I'm the voice where freedom rings. You're the love your bright heart brings. We are the waves starting to spring, for we are the change we sing. We are what the world is becoming, and we know it won't be long. We all hear change strumming. Won't you sing along? Thank you. And now we invite the children to join us for RE, the children's area. If the people along the center aisle would join hands, we'll sing the children out.
As we've done for the past few weeks, we're going to drop now into a time of quiet, some breathing, some spoken and silent meditation. So I invite you to uncross your arms and put your feet on the floor, close your eyes. If you're holding a book or something, you might want to put that down. Close your eyes and just one big exhale to start. Just let it out. And then start some intentional breathing, which is 4 beats in slowly through your nose and 5 or 6 beats out slowly through your mouth in a steady rhythm, seeing how much spaciousness you can create from the crown of your head down to the soles of your feet that are rooted to the ground. See where you can release tension, fear, impatience, distractions. Just breathe. 4 in, 5 or 6 out. While you breathe, I offer this spoken meditation. Heart of my heart, speak to me, and I will turn to thee. Say to me, drop the rock, unlatch the door, loosen the knot, tear the curtain, cut the lock, and I will listen and do so. Say to me, feet on the ground, eyes on the horizon, tear in the eye, song in the mouth, sun and rain on the shoulder, love in the word, and I will listen and do so. Say to me, resist meanness still, live by honor still, run from winning and losing, losing and winning, and be still. And I will, I say to thee, turn back to the world and the promise of spring. Let us continue our breathing in silence. Stop and feel, breathe, and allow. We'll remain seated for our quiet song, number 123 in the Gray Hymnal, Spirit of Life.
Excerpts from East of Eden by John Steinbeck. In John Steinbeck's classic novel, East of Eden, the character Samuel is reminiscing with Mr. Lee, the Chinese cook, who is the book's moral anchor. Lee tells a fascinating story about joining 4 elderly Chinese gentlemen for 2 years to study Hebrew, so that they can properly understand one single verse in the 4th chapter of Genesis, containing the word Timshel. It becomes a mission for them to determine the precise meaning of what God said to Cain, who famously smites his brother Abel. Did God say, "Sin crouches at the door, but thou shalt rule over it," as in the King James Version? Did God say, "Do thou rule over it," as in the American Standard Version? After 2 years, they decided that both translations were flawed. Mr. Lee explains, "This was the gold mine from our mining. thou mayest rule over sin. The old gentleman smiled and nodded and felt the years were well spent. You see, he continues, the American Standard Version orders men to triumph over sin, and you call sin ignorance. The King James Version makes the promise in thou shalt, meaning that men will surely triumph over sin. But thou mayest, that gives us a choice. It may be the most important word in the world. That says the way is open. That throws it back on the person. For if thou mayest, it is also true that thou mayest not. Thou mayest makes a man great. Give him stature with the gods, for in his weakness and his filth and his murder of his brother, he has still this great choice. He can choose his course and fight it through and win, or not. Think of the glory of his choice. Lee's voice, writes Steinbeck, was a chant of triumph.
In his classic novel, East of Eden, John Steinbeck gives us an unlikely moralist and Bible scholar in the character of Mr. Lee. As you heard in the reading, the Chinese cook recounts his 2-year process of deliberation regarding the meaning of one Hebrew word, timshel, in Genesis. And he ultimately settles on that definition, thou mayest rule over sin. It might be the most important word in the world, he argues, for it says the way is open and it throws it back on a person. For if thou mayest, it is also true that thou mayest not. As a minister, I've often been asked, what does it mean to be moral? What do you think about evil? I believe my response would have resonated with Mr. Lee. We are born with free will, and the way is open. Therefore, we must choose in every moment of every day, and even our smallest actions, to co-create with positive forces in the universe or to co-destroy with negative ones. This notion of choice, thou mayest and mayest not, lay at the very core of our American society and our liberal Unitarian Universalist religion. This relative latitude to choose is both awesome and horrible at once, because it begs the question, how do we know? How do we learn moral behavior and how to exercise our moral freedom in a postmodern society and in a creedless religious tradition? What instincts might we cultivate? What skills might we strive to hone and pass on to our children regarding ethical decision-making, especially now in the moral wreckage of MAGA America and increasing social lawlessness? More so, if we are to embrace and genuinely nurture moral freedom in America, how will we arrive at some common ground about the meaning of such slippery terms like virtue and ethics? When it comes to right and wrong, moral and immoral, Is a consensus at the crossroads even a possibility? And if it isn't, how do we coexist in this country in 2023? A nation of Proud Boys and Black Lives Matter activists in which fellow citizens consider virtuous what we would define as the starkest evil, and vice versa. From the time that we crawled out of the primordial ooze, or, as some would prefer, from the third day of creation hence, the question of right versus wrong has vexed, captivated, and engaged humanity. In his book, How Good Do We Have to Be, a very well-known book, the Rabbi Harold Kushner speculates that people from the Judeo-Christian traditions have attempted for centuries to recreate the Garden of Eden by temporarily going back to a time before we knew the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, a time when we could behave like children, like animals, doing what we felt like doing and not being responsible for our actions because we were not expected to know better. But there is no going back to Eden. We've both decimated it and outgrown it. We reside in Steinbeck country, east of Eden, not a paradise, but rather an undulating landscape of temptations and choices, the ridiculous, the cruel, and the sublime. We're human beings. We are blessed and burdened with a conscience, and we cannot pretend to be naive children, no matter how much of an escape hatch or a lark that might provide. It would amount to what Christians might call cheap grace. Rabbi Kushner concludes, and I agree with him, that for the most part, humans want to be held accountable as moral beings, rather than being treated like clueless children or Neanderthals who can't grasp the concepts of right and wrong. The internet, Twitter, now called X, QAnon, crooks in Congress, they have all made it a lot more difficult, but I stand by my premise. I think that in the civilized modern world, most folks recognize at least the option of cultivating virtue in their lives. Yet this word virtue, that's a slippery one too, isn't it? In writing his book called Moral Freedom, The Search for Virtue in a World of Choice, it was written back in 2001, just to give you a time frame. The scholar Alan Wolf argues that America is moving from time-tested moral rules into an age in which individuals are expected to determine for themselves what it means to live a good and virtuous life. Wolf is not entirely comfortable with these developments. Are you? Think about the past 22 years in our country. He notes that the economic liberty of the 19th century led not to independent yeomen, but to a regime of mass consumption, and that the political freedom of the 20th century, far from creating enlightened civic participation, instead brought voter apathy and toxic individualism. Wolf worries, too, that moral freedom will not produce an age of serious moral judgment, but rather one of increased murkiness and ambivalence. And we see where it's come in the past 22 years. His hunch was spot on. A case in point, when Wolf asked Americans of all stripes to define the term virtue and define the term vice, the success rate for the latter word, vice, was much higher. People knew just how to define vice. But defining virtue, that turned out to be surprising and uniformly difficult. It stumped people. Some observers fret that in a society without a widespread belief in God anymore, and increasingly without a shared set of common values, there is a potential for nihilism, that is, the rejection of all moral principles, to the point where nothing matters. Nothing is sacred, nothing should be protected, that there is no wrong. In our post-truth, conspiracy-plagued, grievance-addicted, get away with whatever you can society, I see this too, and it worries me. In their book entitled All Things Shining, the professors Sean Kelly and Hubert Dreyfus note that in the past, people had relatively few existential choices to make because a system of beliefs was reinforced by social hierarchy and real respect for the civil order. But today, a burdening crush of choices and an air of mayhem has left many of us marooned between the island of external influences and the mainland of our innate wisdom and goodness. In ancient Greece, a whole pantheon of shining gods stood ready to draw an appropriate action out of you. Like an athlete in the zone, you were called to a harmonious attunement with the world, so absorbed in it that you couldn't make a wrong choice. Clearly, this promise has gone astray. Nevertheless, Professor Kelly believes, and I agree, that it is possible to train our characters to respond reflexively during meaningful moments in our lives. His book draws on the traditional canon of Western literature, from Homer to Dante to Melville's Moby Dick, as a means for laying out a solution to this problem. The cultivation of a knowledge or understanding so deep that when the need to choose is called for, however unexpectedly, its possessors will act correctly, almost without thinking, drawing from their community or cultural heritage the knowledge of what to do. And he calls this process whooshing up, hence the title of my sermon, Whooshing Up. A communal, sacred phenomenon that is as close as we might get to just what those ancient Greeks admired and cultivated. Kelly argues, perceptively and a little sadly, I would say, that one of the few such sacred or whoosh moments left in modern life occurs when a crowd rises spontaneously to cheer a great play in a sports arena, or perhaps, if her recent summer tour is evidence, the euphoria of a Taylor Swift concert. Most people can identify with that reaction, and he hopes that the awareness of this visceral understanding can lead to the development of other kinds of consequential, shared experiences or whoosh moments when it comes to something deeper, like exercising your character, your integrity, your virtue. And yet the news is full of moments that are distinctly non-whooshing. A mob invading and desecrating the U.S. Capitol, abortion clinics picketed and bombed, violence against migrants on the Texas border, a black teen with a pocket full of Skittles being shot dead in a Florida subdivision, a gay nightclub being shot up, activists fighting fascism are labeled Antifa, which doesn't make any sense, and are considered subversive. We really are living in a perilous time of cute black and white viewpoints, aren't we? There is just not much gray area anymore in the public square. And gray area is what we desperately need, because that is where moral complexity resides, in the gray area, in a place that is not black and white. And I'd argue that moral complexity is really the nemesis of Americans who crave simplistic, no muss or fuss ethics and standards for everyone. Of course, we've heard many times that immorality is considered synonymous with liberalism, and I don't buy that, because inherent in the liberal voice is the notion of mayest. Thou mayest, and thou mayest not. But you know, the free church isn't a free-for-all. We still have things that are meant to ground us. To be religious or political or moral liberally is to face that task of discernment and the responsibility of choice. Because when we embrace moral complexity in our world, we have to examine the many choices we have for ethical decision-making and confront our own inner moral complexity. We don't always whoosh right off the bat, do we? Sometimes it takes a little time to get there. And in doing so, we agree to grapple with our capacity to not only make really good choices, but bad ones with alarming regularity. As a Unitarian Universalist, I consider this call towards reflection and wrestling with our demons a gift rather than a curse. As I see it, either we chafe under the weight of codified moral codes, or we demonstrate a willingness to become unfettered but skilled ethicists in even our smallest actions. Virtues are instincts to be cultivated and activated, not techniques that can be taught. The difference, for example, between living our UU principles and merely memorizing them or reciting them on Sunday morning, like some congregations do. Yet virtues, like skills, they also engage the will. If someone accuses me of unjust behavior, I cannot just excuse myself by saying, "Oh, I did it deliberately," as if it is somehow sophisticated or clever to be immoral or unethical. Moral ambiguity is one of the ways that media and culture can challenge its audience. It is holding up a mirror and asking them how much they understand or condone actions that are being taken, not just by themselves, but by other people. And for us religious liberals, the toolbox for this is characteristically unorthodox. We just can't pick up any old hammer or wrench and expect it to aid us in the construction of a postmodern morality. The UU religious exploration programs we offer our youth is moral education. I picked this up, it's in our lobby. Each person is important. Be kind in all you do. We care for Earth's lifeboat. Build a fair and peaceful world. This is moral education, values education that we need to protect and support. You know, UUs have always cared about conscience, and yet we are often misunderstood and characterized as morally loose. Sometimes this can be amusing. For example, I recall an episode of The Simpsons, a show most of us know, in which young Bart is playing a religious video game with his fundamentalist friends, the Flanders, and apparently the object was to strike a heathen with a ray of God's light and convert him to Jesus. Bart hits a suspected heathen and exclaims, "I got one." And the friend says, "No, you just winged him and made him a Unitarian." Unitarianism comes up a lot in The Simpsons because one of the creators is, in fact, a UU. In truth, the intentional cultivation of morality is and has always been a central activity for our historic Unitarians and Universalists. William Ellery Channing went so far as to argue that the development of conscience heightens our likeness to God. And we have our principles. And it's not difficult for us to affirm and promote respect for the independent web of existence of which we are all a part. But then we really need to take it a step further and ask, what have I done personally to reduce my negative impact on the planet? That's where the whooshing happens. That's where it happens. There are no easy fixes, no pat formulas, no foolproof recipes for morality. You notice that I haven't solved the problem in my 20 minutes up here today. As we decide thou mayest and thou mayest not, moment by moment, we must ask ourselves, am I using my moral freedom, my reason, my conscience, all of the ethical tools at my disposal responsibly? As we call in the tribes and join together in hope in a divisive America, we must be willing to challenge ourselves with the question, am I whooshing up, or have I become ambivalent and marooned in a bog? Here, east of Eden, in a postmodern and morally weary but optimistic and resourceful America, there is no lone tree of knowledge sunlit in a garden. We reside in a dappled forest of relative freedom where we are blessed and we are challenged by choice. Thou mayest and thou mayest not. What will be the meaning of your life? Think on these things and choose wisely. Come build a land, O people so bold. Blessed be, blessed we, and amen. Our hymn is number 1018 in the Teal hymnal, Come and Go With Me, and the words will also be on the screen.
Please rise as you are able.
Please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able.
We take an offering today, reminding ourselves how many gifts we have to offer, and to remember that we are a part of something bigger than ourselves. Here at Eastrose, we share half our offering with a community nonprofit that we support. This quarter, we support Outgrowing Hunger, an organization that builds and operates community farms and gardens for refugees, immigrants, and people who care about affordable access to real food in Portland and Gresham. If you attend online, you may donate by visiting our website and clicking the donate button, or you can scan the code on the screen. We will now receive an offering for the support of this religious community and its work in the world. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are both willing and able. As our chalice flame is extinguished this morning, let us carry its glow with us. May the spirit of peace and togetherness bless your lives.
Our benediction today is from Philippians. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things.
I have a few announcements this morning. Are you interested in singing in a small group for homecoming? That's on September 10th. If so, see Mary today. There will be an improv class beginning September 1st. Eastrose member Deanna Hall will be teaching an improvisation class in the sanctuary. Eastrose hikers, this coming Wednesday, August 23rd, the Eastrose hiking group will hike on the north side of Mount Hood. And Jeannie Mooney has a sweet Siamese cat who needs to find a new home. She should be the only pet in the house, though. For additional announcements or details, please see the pedals. And now the service is ended. And if you're attending online, exit YouTube and connect to Cafe Conversations via Zoom. Those here at Eastrose are invited to remain and have some coffee and some visiting time. We hope to see you all next week. Bring a friend.